thank you all for coming. This is obviously the first ever Collectors Night, and we're really excited. And to be honest, we did not know what to expect when we put this out there. We kind of thought it would be 10 people drinking at a bar watching a Yankee game. But thank you to all of you for coming. This is, and I'm very impressed by not just the amount of people that turned out, but the quality of people that turned out. And that's exactly what we were going for with Collectors Night. So real quick here, first of all, who here collects something? Just by show of hands. Okay. So who here collects vintage? Autographs, cards, whatever it is. Okay. Who here just collects like modern, let's say post-90s and after type of stuff? Super modern stuff. Okay, a little bit. All right. Who here doesn't collect and just came for the open bar? All right, good call. That was a good deal, though, right? So real quick, I know almost all of you here, but just if you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Brigandi. This is Chris Caserta. We call him CC.
Hello, everybody.
We're both Chris's. So we are from Brigandi Coins and Collectibles, which is a store up on 57th Street, right here in Manhattan, New York City. If you haven't been by, definitely come check us out. If you like collecting, we have stuff that you're not going to find anywhere really, even at shows, even even on eBay and stuff like that. We try to do more stuff that's scarce, one-of-one type of stuff. Keep it, items that are real interesting with a story. So if you go back here, which I'm sure most of you have been already, we have our curated collection for the event this evening. All sorts of different stuff from Abraham Lincoln autographs, all the way up to modern memorabilia. With a heavy focus on Jackie Robinson. Obviously, tomorrow is the 75th anniversary of the breaking the color barrier. So that's our theme here tonight. You'll see a lot of Jackie stuff. We have some Jackie T-shirts that we're actually going to give away in a little bit. We have a few more giveaways throughout the night, and the grand prize is going to be a Mickey Mantle 8x10 photo, which is right there in the back. We'll bring that out here in a moment too. So just real quick, my background in the hobby is that Brigandi Coins and Collectibles was a coin store, strictly a coin store back in the 1950s, started by my grandfather. So I'm third generation. So it started as coins in the 1980s when sports memorabilia started getting popular and the shows started popping up. My dad, John Brigandi, you can raise your hand so everybody can see him. He's right here.
The legend.
He's,
in my own mind.
He's one of the longest guys in the hobby. He's an expert. He knows his stuff backwards and forwards. If he hasn't seen it or owned it, it probably doesn't exist. In other words. So anyway, so growing up in the hobby, Dad would bring home baseball cards from the shop. 1990 Fleer, Upper Deck, Donruss, that type of stuff. And I'd open them as a kid, and that was really my first entry into the hobby, which I'm sure that was how you guys probably got in the hobby. Baseball cards we kind of consider them the backbone of the hobby, and then everybody kind of goes their own ways, right? Their own veins, get into different areas, whether it's cards, game use, memorabilia, whatever it is. But growing up, I got to see some incredible stuff beyond just the cards. So my dad dealt in game-used uniforms, and we still do. But back then, this stuff was readily available. A Babe Ruth jersey coming into the store in New York City, that was something, I don't want to say frequent, but it did happen. Gehrig Jersey, Sandy Koufax rookie jersey. This stuff, at one time, the 80s, 90s, was readily available. Today, all this stuff, it's millions of dollars. The only way you're going to see it is behind glass at a museum or at a show. This stuff is so rare, and it's finally getting the attention that we always thought it deserved. So that kind of brings me to today in the market and where we are. So obviously the last 2 years with the pandemic has brought about a crazy change, obviously, in the amount of people in the hobby, but just about the values of everything, of all sorts of collectibles. When people were home, they weren't going on vacation, they weren't going out to dinner, they weren't spending their money on whatever activity they would normally do. And it got poured into Amazon, eBay, and hobbies. And our hobby, knock on wood, was one of the biggest, improvement, or what saw the biggest draw of collectors. So thankful to that our hobby got to a point that we always fantasized that it would. So now most people collect. If you even talk to your friends casually at like a dinner party or somebody, someone who recently got into the hobby during the pandemic. So we want to celebrate the hobby growing to where it is, and obviously Jackie Robinson, and obviously New York City just coming back. So this is probably one of the first nights out that you guys have all had here in New York City. So thank you all for coming. Give yourselves a round of applause, because I'm just happy to be here. I think I hit everything I kind of wanted to hit.
You nailed it.
We have the collection. We're doing raffles, so if you didn't buy raffle tickets yet, they're $10 each. Go see Justin right here. This is my cousin, by the way, Justin. I do want to introduce him. So like I said, we do coins. Justin does coins and gold, silver bullion trading at our store. So if that's something that interests you, talk to him. He can tell you all about that type of stuff. Otherwise, we're going to get right to it. We're going to introduce Gregg Caserta. Where are you, Gregg?
Hey, man.
Yeah, come on up.
All right.
You want to introduce your brother?
Yeah.
Yeah, take a seat.
Hey, bro. Again, guys, I'm CC. Real quick, over about 11 years ago, Chris asked me if I could come in and scan baseball cards and put them on eBay for him, and here we are. So thanks for being here, everybody. As he also said, when we first did this, it was to watch a Yankee game and have a couple of beers with some friends, so just like a little baseball event. And the first person I thought of was my older brother, Gregg. Just being a baseball event, because Gregg has been around the game more than anybody here, I guarantee it. I'll let him talk about himself more, but he's a sports broadcaster. You know, he's done minor league baseball. You've probably heard him on the Fan, CBS Radio, and some other things. So that's why he was the first guest, and I thank you for coming, brother. And you know, at first he was like, everybody on this panel is a collector, but no better person to ease into the night before the Yankee game than my bro. So I'm going to give you the mic real quick before I ask you a few questions.
All right.
Just a quick intro. Tell them what's going on.
Everybody, good to see you. Nice to meet a lot of you. And like my brother said, I have spent a good chunk of my life in baseball. Failed JV player that eventually got into broadcasting. And like he said, starting in 2013, I announced every level of minor league baseball, which culminated last year in my major league call-up. I called 2 games on the Mets radio network. I'm still doing freelance work with MLB Network, and like my brother said, you can hear me doing updates on WFAN. So this is something that I've really been looking forward to, and I know for you guys, this is a big night, meeting a lot of people that have the same interests and the same hobbies, and it's great to be a part of this.
By the way, awesome you came up with a drink. Well done.
Of course.
So real quick, you know, we're going to watch a Yankee game tonight. We weren't sure if that was going to happen, right? April 14th, crazy lockout. Just talk about real quick the importance of baseball finally ending the lockout, MLB getting their stuff together, and the importance of actually having games tomorrow for Jackie's 75th anniversary.
Well, yeah, I think that, I don't know how a lot of you felt, but when they left those meetings in Florida without a deal, I really thought that we were going to lose games this year. I did not think we would get 162 in. They obviously sped things up and they came to a resolution. So yeah, the timing's great that we get the Jackie Robinson Day tomorrow. I think it's an amazing day around baseball. I think we can all agree, seeing everybody wear the number 42. They finally profiled players and they focus on African American players. They talk to guys and they asked them what Jackie meant to them, and to get their responses and to realize the scope of what he meant, not just for baseball, but for sports and for this country, it's great. And again, I wasn't sure if we'd have it. I think a lot of us were curious about that, but here we are, and it's a good night to be back out, celebrating together, and being able to watch, here we are, a weekend.
Amen. So that leads into the next question. Putting the spotlight on players tomorrow is huge, which is something that we've talked about personally. Baseball kind of lacking behind, and for all the collectors here, right, especially card collectors, we see that, you know, every day with NBA and NFL, basketball and football, kind of taking over the hobby, especially in modern. You know, why do you think that is? Do you think baseball's slipping a little bit? And what can they do to kind of get back to where it was in, you know, the golden age, 50s and 60s, when baseball just dominated?
So I'll just give you, the timing of this is actually really great, because I was doing updates this morning on CBS Sports Radio, which is a national platform. And in New York, you'd expect guys to talk about, the hosts to talk about the Yankees and the Mets. But the national hosts were talking about baseball. And why is that? Anybody watch the Dodgers game yesterday?
Yes.
Why was baseball making national headlines? Because again, another instance of something happening where you look and you go, yeah, it's not the baseball that I grew up with. So I do think that it is lagging in a certain way. I think that the other night, for instance, I'm watching the Yankee game. There's a Subway commercial, and who's in the Subway commercial? It's Steph Curry and Simone Biles, who's an Olympic athlete. You see her once every 4 years. She's obviously recognizable, but why is it that we're not seeing Mike Trout in those commercials? Why isn't Bryce Harper plastered on these commercials? You've got this young crop of stars right now. Soto, Acuna, Shohei Ohtani is a global icon. You don't see him anywhere. And while I mentioned to a couple of guys in the back, I think that a lot of teams do a really nice job with their social media accounts. I think that the league as a whole is lagging in its marketing campaign. I don't think they do a great enough job pushing their guys, pushing the brand. And I hope that, maybe us talking about it starts it and it leads to something else, because something needs to change, because there's possibilities there to get these guys out there more.
Couldn't agree more with you, buddy. But, and then leading to that, the hobby's taken off in the last few years. People are investing now, right? We invest in sports cards. We invest in autographs. So I want to kind of involve you in the collecting aspect of this, because I know you don't collect too much. But being involved in the minor league system, you've seen prospects come up, unbelievable players, some busts, some surprises. Who raised their hand before about collecting modern cards? There was a decent amount of people here, right? A few months ago, I don't know if you guys saw, somebody spent 6 figures on a Jason Dominguez 1-of-1 rookie card for the New York Yankees. He has not seen a single pitch of Major League Baseball. That is a huge risk. Obviously, somebody who had the money, and good for them, but that's a huge risk, investing in somebody like that who we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if he's going to get hurt. We don't know if he's going to be a bust. So, 5 years ago, when you were in the minor league system doing AA games, who were some guys that you saw that were like, this guy is unbelievable, he's going to be a superstar, that if they were in the minor league system today, you may have modern card collectors saying, I need to, invest a lot of money in this guy and, see what he's going to be and hopefully score 10, 20, 50 years down the road.
So I'll hit on a guy right away that just pitched against the Yankees Monday night. The big A train, Alek Manoah, big right-hander for the Blue Jays that started Monday night's game. You're nodding your head, he shoves, right? 95, wipeout slider, developing the changeup. I saw him last year in Buffalo, which is the Blue Jays AAA team. This is a guy that was drafted in the first round in 2019. So because of getting drafted, having the minor league season wiped out in 2020, when he debuted in AAA last year, he had never pitched above high A. Made his AAA debut, struck out 11 over 6 innings. I said, all right, this guy might be here for a couple of weeks. They sent him right to Toronto, made his major league debut in the Bronx last year, threw 6 shutout innings and got the win. So I was right on him. In 2015, I was with Blake Snell, now with the San Diego Padres. At the time, he was in the Tampa Bay Rays system, another first-round pick. And I said, yeah, this guy's got special stuff. 4+ pitches, throwing 95, ends up winning a Cy Young. Now he's a little banged up, but he got a 5-year, $50 million contract. Last thing, I had one bust, and it looked promising for a moment, but in 2017, Scott Kingery was with the Reading Fightin' Phils, Phillies AA team. He was their second baseman. Played about 60 games, was one of the most talked about players in minor league baseball. Perfect fielding, could run, 5 tools. The Phillies eventually gave him a 6-year deal worth $24 million before he ever played a major league game. That's the most amount of money ever given to a player that had never played in the majors before. Scott Kingery is now rehabbing an injured shoulder. He is no longer on their 40-man roster. So while his rookie year was very promising, they never found a position for him. They made changes to his swing. Everybody's uppercutting now, and he's trying to find his way back. So that was my bust-a-roo of the night.
It's a good thing you don't invest in cards.
No, not even close.
But I think what everybody wants to know is, who do we buy today? Who is the future star of 2023, 24, 25?
What about Volpe?
Yeah, you just said it, Volpe. Everybody's yelling about him, right? And, I think it's harder now, too, because guys get fast-tracked. In the past, there was a process of getting a guy through the minors and getting him to the majors. Now, you're seeing guys debut at 19, 20, 21 years old. So I don't know if that affects you guys. Maybe that's something you can attest to, that maybe that will affect you guys in terms of people speculating on guys that haven't made it yet.
No, I'm just gonna wrap up. Yeah, so collecting, especially over the last 2 years, has really turned into a couple things. It's not just collecting because, oh, I like Anthony Volpe or I like Jason Dominguez. It's investors, and there's so much big money now in the hobby that a lot of people, they don't even know what they're collecting. They're just investing strictly in the player. I've never heard the word or the acronym ROI and the word investment so many times in my time in the hobby, more than the last 2 years. Does everybody agree with that? Is the word investment and ROI, is that like all you hear nowadays? And if it makes you sick, you can raise your hand too, just like me. Because I can't stand that everybody's just, what's the ROI on everything? So, but thank you, Greg, for coming out.
Thanks, guys.
No, that's it. I appreciate you coming, bro. Real quick, before you grab another drink, we do have the Brigandi Mule, everybody, so make sure you enjoy one. But real quick, we do want to do a giveaway. Tomorrow is, of course, the 75th anniversary of Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. So we had these shirts made up. It's all right, we won't give away that one that fell on the bar floor. Kenny wants it. But real quick, Chris, just hold it up, show everybody it's pretty cool. So real quick, you guys have the raffles. You know, we added, some extra in, so you guys could have a chance to win one of these. We have different sizes, so bro, all the names are on the back, so if you could just pull one of these tickets and, we'll give away the first one of the night.
Marco Avellino, please come on down.
Marco, my man. There you go. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming. Thank you. What size you need?
Extra small.
You got it. Yeah. Wear it to the gym, right?
Yeah, it's super flyweight.
Thanks, buddy. Enjoy.
Yeah, man, of course.
Thanks, man.
Last turn is
JB, Jimmy, and...
All right, guys, so we're gonna go right into the first panel tonight. So we're gonna introduce my father, John Brigandi. Jimmy Spence of JSA Authentication. And Jeffrey Lichtman, who I'm gonna have himself do his own introduction, because we might not know him in the hobby, but I guarantee you know who he is anyway. Tell us about your professional career, and you're a collector, obviously, and just real quick intro, background.
Well, I've been collecting since I'm about 5, and I've got pretty much every card that I've ever collected as a kid, from the Topps Super from 1970 on. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in New York City, and I've represented judges, lawyers, doctors, CEOs. I've represented John Gotti Jr. at trial. I've represented El Chapo at trial. I represent right now the alleged boss of the Colombo family, a crime family. And I got into the hobby, the legal side of it, because I'm really the only criminal lawyer that was, I guess, a high-profile collector in the sense that I've got a pretty significant collection. And naturally, because this is our hobby, there's so much criminal element in it. So being a real estate lawyer and being a collector doesn't really get you a lot of play in the hobby. Being a top criminal lawyer in New York City, well, the phone doesn't stop ringing from people in the hobby. And this was never something that I looked to do. I do major federal criminal cases, but I love baseball cards, and I collect. So it started with calls around the time, I suppose, when the Mastro investigation was going on. I represented a bunch of people there. I ended up suing Mastro successfully, and I started representing other people that have come out publicly in terms of criminal cases against them, or where they've been cooperating against other people in the hobby that were committing crimes. And I probably represented 100 people in the hobby. It's a small part of my business, but it's a beloved part. And that's how I got into this seat today.
All right, thank you. And John Brigandi.
I'm going to hand it off to Jimmy, my dear friend.
My name is Jimmy Spence Jr. I'm actually third generation of 4 generations of James Spences in our industry. My grandfather was a big collector back in the 1940s, which I could talk about a little bit later. My son runs the JSA office down in Fort Lauderdale, and the office that I work in is in Parsippany. And we've been in business since 2005. Obviously, some of you know my past history. I've worked for and started PSA DNA back in 1999. And, well, I go to work every day, and I work very hard, authenticating autographs for just about every major auction house in the industry. It is not just my career, it's my hobby, my love, my passion, and I'd have to say that it's turned into an obsession. And I thoroughly enjoy it even to this day, and I've met some of the most wonderful people in this industry. I've gone to weddings, bar mitzvahs, all kinds of social activities with people I've met, and I don't get out much anymore because I'm kind of in my office very often doing administrative duties, but I was probably one of the most visible dealers in the country. Ask my ex-wife. In 1993, I actually set up at 47 weekends at shows around the country. And if I had to do it all over again, I would do it all over again. And that's all pre-eBay. And since then, you know, it's obviously evolved into what you know it today. But I very much appreciate you inviting me.
Thank you for coming. And John Brigandi?
Rate of investment?
ROI.
Close. Well, where do I start? I'm a second generation Brigandi coin. My dad started in 1959. And we started as a rare coin business, Chris said, and it slowly morphed into silver and gold trading. And then I was on the way home from a buying trip or a conference trip in Asia. And on the way back, I had to stop at the winter ANA, the American Numismatic Association Convention. I think it was Charlotte or Charles, I can't remember. In any case, I ran across this baseball card, 1954 Mantle. It was $50. So I bought it from a coin dealer. And it just sat on my desk for a year, and I just fell in love with it. A sports dealer came in through one of our ads, as you see up on the boards, and one of the old dealers, Gelman, the Gelman group. And he talked to me about baseball cards, and I just couldn't stop talking about it. He wanted to buy platinum Chinese pandas, and I wanted to just talk baseball cards. Well, long story short, he took care of me, put me under his wing, and made sure I didn't make any mistakes. Before I knew it, I amassed a ridiculous collection. I couldn't stop buying. And he said to me one day, hey, you really need to start selling this stuff. And I said, well, I love it. He says, well, what if you upgraded what you had and sold off your doubles? And so I did. I took the worst case in the store at the time. This was like 86, 87. And a case where we couldn't sell $100 bills for $90. And before I knew it, it was the best-selling case. My brothers were like, this is unbelievable. You know? So that's that. My education, I was going to be the consigliere of the family. I was going to be the attorney. I went to law school, clerked at the appellate division later. Worked at the appellate division for the disciplinary committee for years, well, I gave it up in the mid '80s, and I became a coin dealer, and then a baseball card dealer, and that's where we are today. The most important thing I want to say, that's all real nonsense. The real most important part is that everybody here is here for a reason, because we're all collectors, and we all love the hobby. And it's a good group of people, and we want to continue this as long as we can as a collecting group. Listen, we all understand there's money here, a lot of money. That's beside the point. Certainly tonight it's beside the point. We're here because we love collecting, and that's what's important. And we're going to continue this to the extent that we can, and hopefully it'll be double the size next time. And I can assure you, anybody that doesn't have what we defined as integrity certainly won't be coming back. And obviously, you're all invited next time, obviously, I was going to say. But it's really important that good people come and we share thoughts, we share collections, we share stories. That's the most important thing to me. And by the way, I've known Jimmy for over 30 years, and I can attest to you that he is the hardest working person in the hobby, that's for sure.
Thank you for recognizing me.
So we just heard about the history of Brigandi collectibles, but I want to talk about, and I kind of brought this up in the beginning, about this new era of the hobby, which is just the last 2 years. And it was slowly growing before then. Things were getting stronger price-wise. But what is the biggest difference today versus what you were just saying in the 1980s and the 1990s?
It was a small group, obviously, right? And we always knew how great this stuff was. I mean, to this day, I get charged up about something small, something that's almost inconsequential in terms of value. And I knew one day it would take hold. I just knew it, but I didn't know when. And as I was getting older and getting bolder and bolder, I realized it may not happen. And then suddenly, during the pandemic, it just hit. And that's kind of like, we always say, we trade gold and silver all day long. And we always say, when you least expect it, that's when it goes up, or that's when it goes down precipitously. So I think it's here to stay, for sure. I'm not 100% sure I'm happy with ROI, but we'll get through it. And the great part about it is more and more people recognize it as a tangible asset, because if you do it right, it is. If you buy Jason Dominguez, cards at $400,000, maybe it's a gamble, just maybe. Jim, actually, he's the Gary Sanchez. Just some thought.
Yes. Same question for Jimmy from the authentication side. The last few years versus,
In the past 30 years, let's talk about that. I was in the hobby prior to that, but not so much on the commercial side. But there's no doubt that the three biggest things that have happened in the last 30 years have been auction houses. Okay, that's the beginning of, that was a new way of getting items out there. You obviously had dealers. A lot of them were weekend warriors selling things just on the weekend, going to their regular job during the week. That was tremendous. Authentication and grading. It saved the hobby, believe me it did. At least, I'll talk about autographs specifically. It was the wild, wild west out there. And if something wasn't going to be done, because it wasn't going to be regulated by our government, so we had to do this from within. Very important to the hobby, because people came up with the most elaborate stories. People were buying and selling things recklessly, and now you have at least 3 reputable companies out there that deal with autographs, and probably as far as cards are concerned, there's probably more, 5 or 6 that do the grading of cards. Very, very important to this industry, because it could have destroyed everything. It could have destroyed the value of my own personal collection. And I felt that it was beyond important that people accepted it. At first it wasn't easy. I had people jumping over the table, wanting to take swings at me. Had to defend myself a few times. But fortunately, it took, and I have to give the auction houses, especially kudos to hiring people like myself, allowing us to come in and sort out the chicken salad from the chicken shit. And that was really, really big in our industry. What's coming up in the future is probably going to be different than the last 30 years. We're talking about NFTs, and we're talking about fractionalized buying, and even artificial intelligence. These are all things that if you asked me 5 years ago, I would have said you're nuts. I didn't see there being any room in this industry for it, but now that is going to change things as well. So look for new things. There's always going to be new ideas, and fortunately, as long as people have trust in opinions and trust in abilities, this will flourish, because people are willing to spend more and more on validity, quality, scarcity. Okay, so that's just
Well
my
said.
take on it.
Well said, yeah. So a similar question for Jeffrey, but as a collector, the price of your own collection is probably, 10x or doubled at least in just the last 2 years. So as a collector, does that make you, obviously makes you happy, right? What you have is worth more, but it's harder to buy stuff now because there's new values. Cards that were selling for $2,000-3,000, sometimes are selling for $10,000-20,000 today.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I mean, it's fair, but it depends on what kind of collector you are. I never considered my collection, which is now worth in the millions, I never considered it one day as an asset from the beginning. When I started collecting, I would buy cards that I liked. Anytime I ever purchased a card because I thought that it might go up in value and I didn't buy it because I loved it, I regretted it later. And if you buy the stuff because you really care about it, because it enriches your life, because this is important, and if you're a collector, you know what I'm talking about. Just getting that in your sweaty little hand, that card, is like the greatest feeling ever when the package comes. There was a joke about Mastro Auctions that they had this beautiful orange packing tape. Never mind the fact that they were committing massive fraud against you. You loved that orange packing tape because it meant that you had your cards that were inside. So I think that if you feel that way about the cards, it doesn't make a difference if it goes up. Yes, it's harder to buy, but if you're a collector, you can always find something that you love. I mean, I buy cards now regularly, six-figure cards. Cards that cost $50 mean just as much to me. If you have that kind of attitude that you love what you're buying, it's painful to sell a card. You don't consider it an investment. You have other investments. You have stocks and bonds and CDs. These are things that don't give you anything. They don't give you any warmth. But the cards, on the other hand, I mean, I'm a massive Ty Cobb collector, and I look at my cards and I still get dreamy. And I think I was telling somebody at the beginning of the night that I just purchased, I'm also a Hal Chase collector. It was like one of the first great Yankees. Before they were the Yankees, they were the New York Highlanders at the beginning of the 20th century. And I bought a game-used bat, Hal Chase, which, holding it in my hands the other day, I almost passed out. I was so excited. But what was delivered to my house today that I can't wait to get home to was a custom-made display case for this bat. And yeah, and I'm a fairly busy person. I've got, 10 federal criminal trials coming up in the next 2 years. I'm pretty busy. I work 7 days a week. Nothing is more important than that Hal Chase bat getting into that case with the blue velvet background. That's all that I care about. So if you love what you do, if you love this for the right reasons, the money going up, going down, it doesn't make a difference because I'm not going to sell the cards. They're going to probably get buried with them.
Just to touch on that real quick, when I first started working, with John and Chris, and that was the first thing you told me, JB, was it's all about what you love. Don't look at the price tag. If you like it, just trust your gut and go with it. So real quick, not to call you out, but today when we were putting together the collection to present to all you guys and we showed off some cool stuff, John comes running out of the vault with an old baseball box, vintage, and he's like, you guys got to check this out. It's awesome. So we opened it up, and it was a Campbell's Soup Mickey Mantle promotion baseball. Wasn't signed, just an old advertising baseball. And Chris and I, sorry John, we kind of looked at each other like, what is it? It's cool. And the smile on your face, JB, you were so fired up about this thing, and it didn't matter the value. It was just, I love this. This is cool. And that's how you've always been doing it. Yeah, we refused to let him bring it. It's not here. You're not going to see it.
It got trumped. That's not important.
We
No,
put
it's
Babe Ruth instead.
Yeah,
No, but it is important.
but exactly. And you
It's only
were,
worth $500 or $600. It's great.
yeah, and you've been preaching that since I started working with you guys.
And I still get charged.
Yeah.
So, real fast, Chris's will buy things out of auction, they'll buy things off eBay, they'll buy everywhere, right? And the stuff comes in once in a while in boxes, like maybe 3, 4, 5 times, a week, maybe more, it doesn't matter. I personally open them up, I go, Chris, what the hell is this? Where'd you buy it from? So I don't remember, And I open it up and I'm like, it's like Christmas, And that's why we're all here. And I can't stress that enough. Sir, wait. That'll be another question. Wait, you find out about his collection, what he bought. This is the best story of the night. This collection.
I'm gonna stick with Jeffrey real quick. So talking about new prices, highest prices paid and stuff. Recently, in the news, everybody heard about this, not just the people here, everybody upstairs heard about this too. Tom Brady's final touchdown pass football sold at auction for almost $500,000.
518.
518, over $500,000 on a Saturday night. Sunday afternoon, Tom Brady said, I'm coming out of retirement, I'm playing another year. Jeffrey, tell us as much as you can.
Well, I laughed when I saw that somebody had paid $518,000, and the next day Brady came out of retirement, just 3 months, I think. And I remember thinking, I hope that poor guy didn't wire the money to Leland's, because once that money sort of passes, you know, the Rainbow Bridge, it's a lot harder to get it back when it's not in your possession. A few days later, I get a call from the guy that won the football. And I represent people throughout this hobby. I represent SGC, I represent auction houses, I represent pretty much all across, many collectors as well. And tells me his tale of woe. I knew the legal issues already, and I agreed with him that the ball that you bought on the Saturday night, the one that would be delivered to you for $518,000, no longer was the ball that's in the letter of authenticity that was provided with the ball. And I said, and for that reason alone, although I believe that everything that Leland said in their description was accurate, they can't deliver what they sold you, and for that reason, you're not paying for the ball. So he hired me, and as I had said to him, and I spoke to, I think, Darren tonight about this, that had Leland's put in the description, look, we don't know what's going to be with Tom Brady, but this right now is the last touchdown ball of his career, this would have been a perfectly fine sale. But it's typical of the auction houses, and this is just what it is, and it's just the way the hobby is. You want to get every last dollar you can out of everything that you're selling. So the letter of authenticity said, this is the final touchdown ball of Tom Brady's career. Well, it really isn't. If they just would have said the right language, it might not have sold for $518, it might have sold for $375, but he would have had to pay for it. So I can now say that I contacted Leland's lawyers, and I know Leland's lawyers because I've dealt with Leland's lawyers before many times in the past. And then, by the way, if you want to hear a funny story, and I hate to toot my own horn, I've got a podcast. It's called Beyond the Legal Limit, and I actually talk about the time that I received a phone call from Josh Evans threatening to murder my entire family, and we still were friendly after that. That's the kind of hobby this is, that a man calls, talks to you on the phone and says, I'm going to kill you and your entire family, and I'm serious, I've got a gun. And you're like, okay. And he had something nice in his next auction, so I bought it, and we're still friends. That's how the hobby is. Anyway, we talked, I spoke to the lawyer. It took some time. The lawyer, of course, is just some poor guy that knows nothing about the hobby. He just gets called every time I suppose I call. Leland's up, and the owner of Leland's and us, we got together, and they've agreed to void the sale, which is breaking news. If as much as you can have breaking news in a collector's night right now. Right now is the sale was voided. Leland's did the right thing. They certainly have a potential buyer who spends a lot of money on on memorabilia, not paraphernalia, memorabilia. Yeah, exactly. Memorabilia and cards, and he's certainly a fan of Leland's. Leland's did the right thing. Sometimes you need a lawyer to help auction houses do the right thing, but all's well that ends well with them.
You heard it here first. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Fanatics. Everybody knows Fanatics, right? They started with the licenses and team apparel, but they're getting really big in sports collecting now. And they've purchased a lot of companies in our space, and it looks like they're gonna keep going and going and going. And so they bought Steiner Sports, they bought sportsmemorabilia.com. They just stole, I'll say, the licenses from Topps, Panini for trading cards for NBA, NFL, NHL.
HLMS.
They bought Mitchell and Ness this year, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, they're going after everybody, they're trying to buy up everybody. So,
Sorry.
it's tweeted.
No, it's tweeted, but
So my question is, where do you guys see the hobby going with Fanatics consolidating everything? How far can they go? They have so many different verticals. Just kind of your thoughts on the Fanatics consolidation.
Wow, yeah, they are, it's so odd when you see something like that, because years ago it was all mom and pop type businesses. You know, I was mentioning before that there were mom and pop type organizations out there, myself as well. I had a job during the week, and all of a sudden, you know, on the weekends, I'm making more money than I did a whole week. So things are changing. Obviously, the money's changing. It's no longer a hobby, it's an industry. And they're looking to pick off, you know, companies that they think can enhance theirs and grow and build. And I'm sure there are other companies out there as well that, you know, have that kind of interest. But they want to make an impact, and they are. And they have a lot of tentacles, and I'm sure they're approaching, you know, people all over the place. And, you know, will it happen to JSA? I don't know. Not my department.
If you're lucky.
That's why I have a partner. But in any event, I think it's good for the hobby, but actually it's the customers that are going to really set the tone on that. And you've got to determine what you want, and if they're willing to supply that, then it's going to be successful. If they push things upon us that nobody's willing to accept, they're going to have to switch gears and change things up. But you know, it's going to be a very interesting run over the next few years, especially because I see this thing growing, and people that normally wouldn't invest are jumping into it, and it's gaining a lot of respect in a lot of different markets outside of this. So I think it's probably going in the right direction. I don't want to be so definitive, but it seems like there's a lot of smart guys out there that are at the helm.
Well, Jeffrey and I, and Dan, experienced attorney as well, look at it from a different point, a different perspective, and that would be from, you know, what antitrust perspective. The question is, how big do they get? And it's more violative, I would think, of not so much the Sherman Antitrust Act, which we all learned about in school, but really the Clayton Act, which would really be more in line legally. The question is, can they consolidate the business to a point where really they are, in effect, the business, right? So they have to be careful, but they have smarter lawyers than certainly I, looking at it, and they realize they'll be in for a bit of a legal battle, but it's not here yet. But they just have to be careful. You know, if you start buying a few more large companies, the Jimmy Spencers of the world, and the Brigandis, maybe. You know, we're not for sale. But anyway, but generally it's good because it brings a lot more attention to the business. But from their point of view, they're I'm sure they are slowly watching what's going on and trying to cover themselves from a legal standpoint.
I think that's actually a fair point, and there was a rumor, I guess about a year ago, that PSA was going to take over SGC. They were going to buy SGC. That was certainly something that got out, and the whole antitrust issue came out as well, because if you have PSA and SGC under the same roof, you know, all you've got is Beckett, and Beckett is more of a, I guess, modern card shop. It never got anywhere because they didn't, it ended up not going through with any purchase of SGC, but it would have certainly, you know, opened the doors to some questions about legalities of it. I find that the government has been very slow to react. You have a completely unregulated industry. You've had massive fraud that has occurred over the last decades, and now that more money is involved, the fraud is bigger than ever. And still, you've got just a handful of FBI agents throughout this entire country that are working on cases relating to hobby fraud. And I can assure you, there is massive fraud that goes on, you know, either trimmed cards fake cards, shill bidding, you name it, it exists. But the government has been very slow to respond, largely because I think they view baseball cards or the hobby as some piddly, hillbilly thing. It's really not. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it is a commodity, as John pointed out. If you collect gold, respectfully, if you want to look at the chart for gold over the last 20 years and look at a Honus Wagner T206, I can tell you that the Wagner card and the Mantle cards and many other cards dwarf multiples, maybe 100 times more than what gold has gone up. And one aside that I've mentioned about the takeover of all these companies by fanatics, if you're a purist, as I am, I was horrified about the fact that they were getting the licenses for the baseball cards, because if you're a collector, and I collect the set, I've got every set, back into the 50s, the thought that Topps would no longer be the company that was making the card was so physically nauseating to me that when I heard and they, as we learned, they did steal Topps because Topps had no value anymore once they lost the licensing for the baseball cards.
But they will buy Topps.
Well, they bought Topps, and now what made me so thrilled was the fact that it looks like next year when the cards come out, when the license is over for Topps or whatever, I guess now that they bought it, it's still going to be business as usual, and we're still going to have Topps cards. And for me, that was more important than almost even the antitrust issues.
And to your point, which I should have mentioned as well, they're slow to respond, the government. They've got their hands full with so many other things, including crypto, that they don't look at it that way, right? And then lastly, I would say that, which we didn't get into, fanatics will be doing, there's no question they'll be doing NFTs. They're doing it already, I'm sure. They'll produce their own cards. They'll have special agreements with all the players, and they'll have one of ones and one of threes, and it's going to be mind-boggling if you keep. They teach you in law school, just keep taking it out further and further and further, right? When you analyze something, you could just imagine what they could possibly do in the next 5 or 10 years, which, for good or for bad, I don't know. That's to be determined. Jimmy knows what this is. Jimmy authenticated a lot of these. So in early 2000s, I was fortunate enough to buy a large part of this collection. It's called his name is Tom Aiken, and he had a museum. It was called the Cy Young Ohio Baseball Hall of Fame Museum. And he was a real fanatic. He would send baseballs to different players, and he wanted to get one of every player. And this started in the 50s. So he would send this. Excuse me. I called it an atomic bomb. He would, as you can see, he had this package, and he sent a special pen. A special pen, Indian ink. You guys remember Indian ink, right? So jet black. And we never got the pen. We never got. I have 2 of these boxes, but I never got the pen. And this means so much to me. This thing. Anyway, show who's addressed to.
Hal Newhouser.
Yeah.
Cleveland.
Yeah. But so in this collection, and it ranges from Darryl Porter, Robin Young, but in that collection was Ed Cicotti, Jackie Robinson, which I sold for at the time $27,000 in auction. It's probably worth a couple hundred in a heartbeat, because all these signatures are 9s or 10s. This is probably what I'm going to show. Is probably a 10, and they inscribed them all, and it's just phenomenal. So I own 30 or 40 of them, and I just won't sell them until I die, I guess. But they're just amazing, and so it doesn't have, what I'm going to show you is not expensive, but it's cooler than cool, and they're all like this. Cal Ripken, Pete Rose, and what have you. So Chris, if you could just show it around, and it's just phenomenal stuff. All the great stuff I got rid of, unfortunately, because we run a business, right? But it's just phenomenal. And please return pen. Please use special pen in box. Return pen. And you can see the box has been used a million times. And Dan knows his collection, and Jimmy authenticated 3/4 of it, if not more of it, over the years. And it just, I've got 2 of these boxes, and they just, so it doesn't have to be worth a lot of money, right? So, but this dwarfs what Jimmy's story's gonna be.
Actually, the ink that was on that India ink that John was talking about is so indelible. And that's the thing that was very striking about that collection. It was so dark. And it would almost look like it was put on there the day before. And if you didn't understand the story and what a fanatical collector this guy was, and then once the Ohio Hall of Fame Museum folded.
Which means he needed money.
Yeah, it all came about, but it really was a phenomenal collection, and I actually saw it just a few blocks away from here, you know, in your shop. So that really opened up my eyes, and I have many of those examples in my exemplar file, which are specimens of autographs, which the JSA file has very close to 1 million examples of autographs.
And I get a yearly royalty check from them too.
I'm going to tell you a story now. It's a personal story about me and the hobby, and it's the most phenomenal thing that has happened to me in my career in collecting. I mentioned to you before, I'm 3rd or 4th generation. My grandfather started collecting back in the late 1930s. Okay, this article was written about my grandfather. His name was James Spence. He was the original. And he put together a massive collection of autographs. Probably, I'm going to say it was close to 1,000 autographs. And he would put together not just sports, but it was a who's who of anybody that was mildly famous in the world. And that included college presidents. It included, in fact, one was the first warden of Alcatraz. There were every governor at the time. There were 48. He got involved in entertainment as well as literature. There's even a number of presidents. And what happened is my grandfather died in 1978. I was only 18 years old, and my step-grandmother, who lived out in Huntington, Long Island, swiftly took the collection and sold it to the nearest antique dealer. And at that moment, I know my dad and I were, pretty upset that it was not even offered to us, but nevertheless it was gone. I tried in vain to run down this person that had purchased the collection, which I'm sure was purchased for a pittance back then, because it really wasn't worth as much. And I had no luck. Well, anyway, I was a collector, and I was going to build my own collection. I was going to build my own business eventually. I was buying and selling, and then eventually I gave that up for authenticating. And less than 2 years ago, in June, I was, it's very cyclical. 2-3 times a year I go into auction houses, and they lay in front of me at least a day's worth of work. And I authenticate virtually every item that's going to be sold in their upcoming auction. And at 4:30 in the afternoon, after I thought I had completed all the authenticating, one of the managers of the auction house brought in 2 large boxes. And the guy, my employee, was rolling his eyes at the time, saying, "Oh no, we got more to do." I thought, it's not on the list, he's telling me. So I said, nevertheless, I opened up the book, the first one out of the cardboard box, and as I started paging through it, I noticed that every single autograph was personalized to James Spence. Now, this was 42 years I had not seen this collection. This is what gave me my initial love for this hobby. And in this article, you could read, and it mentions how great of a collection it was and who he was. I mean, it mentions, even has a picture of him with a Joe Louis cover. And what these are signed, they're kind of like first day covers, but they're not postmarked that way. But my grandfather would have everyone try and use their own stationery sign an envelope in a certain way. Because he was also a stamp collector, a philatelic collector, he would use an appropriate commemorative stamp to reflect that of the person. If you were the governor of Arizona, there would be a Arizona statehood commemorative stamp from back in the 30s when it was put out or whatever. I got through about 3 or 4 pages of this, and I was starting to feel myself get very emotional because I realized this was my grandfather's collection. I closed the book and asked if I could come back, and about 4 days later I came back to view the collection, and this was consigned to this auction house. Okay, so this wasn't something that they had purchased. I approached the auction house head and said, that I was interested in it, and could he possibly go to the consignor and take my offer to them. And I can only imagine if this was one of the other auction houses in the country. I would have probably had to mortgage off my house and give up my 3 sons. But that wasn't the case. I made a very generous offer, and a few days later they contacted me and they accepted the offer. So coming full circle back into the Spence family was the entire collection. Now, what was in the collection? If you go onto our website, probably the most spectacular piece was the envelope written all in his hand, Babe Ruth, postmarked 1943, to James Spence. The addresses, everything, it's on his personal stationery. And the really cool thing is I was, to be quite honestly, when I first started to see this collection, I closed it after looking at just 3 pages. And I was afraid that I was going to cry, because I knew that would elevate the price of things. So I had to come back in a few days. But in any event, when I got this collection, I paid for it, brought it back to my office. I started showing it to some of my workers, and one of them noticed inside that there was something inside the Babe Ruth envelope. And it was totally sealed. I mean, it was lit, the envelope you could see, but what my grandfather must have done is he must have taken a very fine slit down the side of it and cut off the edge, the right edge of the envelope. And I thought, this could be something big. My son is a videographer. I told him to set up the lights. Let's get this whole thing on tape. And sure enough, we let that roll. I said, it was almost like one of these pack pulls that they do to them. And just there, right on film, I said, I'm going to see what's inside of here. I opened it up. What do I yank out of it? But yet another Babe Ruth autograph made out to my grandfather as well. So beyond that, it's just a tremendous collection. Quite honestly, I haven't even had time to go through the entire thing. There's just, and I brought a couple of examples of that collection here. And this one here, John, why don't you start?
Yep.
That one there's Joe Dimaggio. All in Dimaggio's handwriting.
Just vintage. You just don't see them like this. Just great.
And it's made out to my grandfather, where his place of work, he worked for Con Edison in Long Island City. And the entire thing is in his handwriting. Got the
What's the return address? Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, Yankee Stadium, right?
Jimmy, were there any fakes?
Yes, believe
Yeah,
me.
there-
Well,
no,
let's use the
Secretarial.
word secretarial.
Yeah, secretarial.
I mean, was anybody maliciously trying to
No,
get him?
no.
And I'll give you an example. The picture of him holding up that Joe Louis piece, I have the Joe Louis right here, and this is secretarial.
No kidding.
Yes, but nevertheless, it's on his own letterhead, and it still means.
Oh, yeah.
And there are, there's secretarials throughout. Not a tremendous amount, but there's a few here and there.
Excuse me for a second. This reminds me of The Godfather 2, when they pass around the gold phone.
And here's one of Harry Truman, 1945, the year he dropped the big one. And this here shows you how my grandfather did it. Now, he would type a beautifully written letter to the person that he was interested in. and specify what he wanted. Now, can you imagine sending this to LeBron James? First of all, he wouldn't even open the envelope, but in any event, they complied, and they were more than happy to comply. That's the interesting part of this collection. They treated my grandfather like gold. They wanted to be part of this.
Yeah.
And here he is, President of the United States, in the middle of a war, and he signed it, and my grandfather's signature
But
is
you have
on
to
there as
look,
well.
he drew a diagram, just like this nut, you know? Put it here, do it this way.
Yeah, yeah.
He drew a diagram to everybody.
There you
And this
go.
is not, I mean, I've seen this collection, it's just, this is what he did.
And one other, I didn't bring the Babe Ruth for security reasons, because I just couldn't bring
Please.
myself to do that.
Please, we have a Honus Wagner here, okay.
Okay, but this one here is to a fellow by the name, and I'm sure not one of you have ever heard of this. His name is Phillip Sawyer. It's mentioned in this article. Phillip Sawyer was an architect. Now, again, he was sending this to everybody. What Phillip Sawyer did is he wrote back to my grandfather in the top of the page, and he says, I can't imagine why you would want this, but and you're gonna. The reason why I'm hesitating, it's hard to read, but I guess there's some idiots among us or whatever, and then he signed it, Phillip Sawyer. But the reason why I'm having difficulty reading this is he wrote it completely backwards in cursive.
What?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, for somebody to have that fine of handwriting and do it backwards, the fellow was an architect. And it's mentioned in that article there. And there's just a plethora of other stuff that's really cool. And, I'm happy to have it back in my family. And I don't mind giving a few pieces to my, my sons or brothers and sisters, but it's going to stay in the family for a very, very long time. And just on a note, I would like to introduce you to the person that made this available to me, and that happens to be Brian Dwyer of Robert Edwards Auction. Stand right there. He could have easily have put this into about 25 different lots in his catalog, and I would have paid a lot more for it, but he saw the historical interest in it and the personal interest, and I applaud you for that.
Glad you got it.
Thank you.
Jimmy, JB, Jeffrey, all three of your hands were raised up high when we asked who collects vintage. That's why you guys were on the panel together. Three amazing stories. We absolutely loved it. We're gonna take a break right now, real quick, before we get into the next panel, and grab a drink. We'll get going. Real quick, Jeffrey, you mentioned the charts of gold and silver going crazy or not going crazy in relation to the card market. Jimmy Spence, a pioneer in autograph authentication, and John Brigandi, a pioneer as well in rare cards. As you guys are mingling, getting a drink, we have some vintage advertisements from the 80s and 90s from Brigandi Coins and Collectibles. We talk about the value of vintage cards going up, times when you could buy 52 mantles for 15 to 20,000. And like I said, Jimmy pioneer in autograph authentication. Check out some of the words that John was using. This was before PSA, SGC, Beckett. There were no grading companies, but the way that they're advertised as their condition. Gem mint. This is before all that. Mint, near mint. So Jeffrey, I know you'll appreciate that. Jimmy, a pioneer in your own right, and JB. So as you guys are going around, enjoy, have a drink. We'll get back to the next panel quickly. And thank you to the three of you for being here.
Yes, I started a basketball media company called Hoops Nation, but had been into collecting, since I was like 14. I'm 21 now, but got back into the hobby for real in probably 2018. Just prospecting for fun and buying stuff that we could give away on our through our media company and do fun stuff there. But then met these guys. They helped usher me into my new phase of collecting, which is things that are historically significant. So guys like Abraham Lincoln, George Washington. I got excited at the historic value, and that you couldn't really take that away, because I saw from buying some of the NBA prospects, some of them panned out. Giannis panned out, but other guys didn't. And, you know, when you get somebody like Lincoln or Washington, they've already panned out all right. So I feel pretty good about that.
Could still be canceled today.
That's true. They got a lot of things named after them, though.
Darren Revell, I've been a collector for a long time. And I currently collect, and also report on the industry. I was at ESPN before Buster was born, which is crazy. But collect checks that have meaningful stories, tickets, and just other types of, anything that's really one of one. I love to, you know, even something that an auction house says doesn't have great value, like when I bought Hugh Hefner's Viagra pill bomb. Still one of one, still a great conversation piece, even if it's awkward, that's okay. So I really enjoy the hobby. I do sell some of my stuff, but many times I buy it back.
That's awesome. Hi, how are you? I'm David Marino. I'm definitely the guy you don't know. So I've had a really interesting hobby journey. I grew up in New York City, and my dad used my local hobby shop as a babysitter on Saturdays and Sundays, and would drop me off and say, make sure he doesn't spend more than this. And I'd sit there, I'd rip cards, I'd collect, I still have them all. And left the hobby when I was 15, 16. Unfortunately, it was right before Kobe's rookie year, definitely way before LeBron's rookie year, and I have a shitload of 1989 Dunruss that if anyone wants to buy, that I'll sell for sure. I have probably a real schizophrenic journey. I was in hospitality for a long time, owned restaurants and bars, then went into finance, and a buddy of mine called me in 2020 and said, we're starting a startup. I just became the CEO. Your Rolodex would be interesting, and I want your mind, and do it with me. And I was like, what is it? And he said, sports cards and collectibles. And I said, that's amazing. No, right? Like, no, I'm in finance. And he convinced me to join, and it's been probably one of the most epic journeys I've ever been on. I've become a rabid collector again. I probably rip more wax than I should admit. So definitely a gambler again. And I had the privilege of creating an event called the Mint Collective with Collectible, and that was an awesome journey and touched a lot of people and different facets of the hobby. And you know, I've definitely evolved into a hobby purist. So thank you for having me.
Real quick, David, can you explain what is Collectible to somebody who hasn't heard of, you know, the fractional business?
That's the company, you didn't say the company.
I apologize, Collectible. So, you know, explaining Collectible to a room of hobby purists is kind of throwing me in the Shark Tank right now. But we take rare, truly, you know, for the most part, iconic assets or assets that we believe will be iconic, and we fractionally make them available to everyone.
So instead of cutting it up like the card companies, you cut it up in
Correct.
a virtual way.
We virtually...
See, now you're there. Now they're your fans.
So thank you. So we take assets and we create an offering circular, submit it to the SEC, deem the asset as security, and then it IPOs on our platform. So some of the rarest, most iconic assets are now available to everybody. And in a room of people that would rather tangibly hold them and cherish them and love them, I understand the value proposition is probably not that interesting. But for us, I think, you know, we almost become stewards of these assets. So we're taking care of them, we're telling the stories around them, and, you know, we frankly have a really interesting opportunity to almost make these collections available to everyone for the next 50, 60, 70 years, hopefully.
And to collectors, and collectors could sell 80% of it to you. They won't have it, but at least they will still have some of the upside.
Absolutely. So the mechanics are extremely interesting to collectors. Darren Revell is officially our spokesperson, by the way. So this is actually a really interesting partnerships opportunity for us. But I think, to me, frankly, I'm definitely going to be in the hobby for the rest of my life. So, you know, at the end of the day, this journey has been extremely fruitful for me as a collector and rebuilding my collection. But I think, there's different ways to participate in the hobby, and I hope that, we are able to build a community that, understands that you can collect and have your personal collection, and collectibles a place where you can invest, terrible word, but you can own a piece of assets that might be unattainable to you, if, you were not able to own it and procure it on your own.
What is this, one mic?
You didn't bring your own, Darren. Come on.
Actually, hold on, I have one. Exactly. BYOM.
So, probably like most people in the audience, the first time I heard about collectible doing a fractional share of an asset, I was like, this is the stupidest thing. It's not gonna work, nobody's gonna wanna buy it. I couldn't have been more wrong. This has just absolutely blown up, it's taken off. It's a genius idea.
It wasn't mine, I promise you that, and I feel bad that you're all stuck with me tonight. Ezra's an amazing steward for the company. I think we've done 212 plus IPOs so far, over $60 million in assets have transacted, and we're definitely a growing company with the right mindset to bridge collectors, investors, bring people from outside the hobby into the hobby, and we think that it's an interesting value proposition, especially in a world of crypto and NFTs. I mean, these are tangible assets. These are assets that we understand, and we think that it's an interesting opportunity beyond this sports-obsessed world to still have an affinity for the athletes, the history behind these assets, and to truly tell a real story around them. So.
So to that point, do you see most of your customers, the people who are buying fractional shares, are they mostly investors? Are there collectors that do this? Going back to the dreaded word ROI, investment, is it strictly a tool to make money, or is this really something that you're seeing a lot of collectors drive into?
I mean, putting me on the spot. There's definitely an ROI involved. We've had 26 exits at an average of 65% return, so people are making money on the platform.
Yeah, that's incredible.
As far as invested assets and people who invest, I think our average return right now is 6% across assets that have not been deplatformed. But I think it's a lot of hobby interested people, true collectors that many of which would probably fit in very well in this room. We haven't really seen a boom outside of the collecting world yet. I think it's a really, really esoteric industry that's hard to understand. How's an outsider going to understand the difference between a Michael Jordan 86 Fleer SGC 10 versus a PSA 10? But I think that realistically, sports is something that unites everybody. And it's a really easy story. I keep on going back to that because storytelling is a big part of our company. It's an easy story to understand when it's made simpler. And I think taking the investing aspects out of it and talking about the players, the teams, the iconic moments, the true history behind these assets is what ends up driving the reasons that people buy. So one interesting thing that I noticed, and for this panel it's kind of interesting, we have less than 1% of our users are under 24 years old, and the meat of our core user is
now Buster's your spokesman.
Honestly, I'd love to have both of you as our spokesperson, but I think that's interesting, right? In a world that's being taken over by crypto and NFTs, to have our user base be in that true collector realm of 26 to 80, varying socioeconomic statuses, it's actually like really like a bright spot for me personally. So yeah, I think to answer your question in the longest way possible, it's a really nice cross section.
So, talk about the hobby changing over the last, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Back 10 years ago, if you wanted to buy a jersey for $100,000, but you couldn't afford it, you only had 20 or you only had 50, you called a friend, you called another collector and said, hey, I have 50, maybe you put up 50 and we split this. Now you don't have to get on the phone and call a buddy and, get those, get that money. You could just you know, whatever you have, you can just get involved. So it's cool to see how it's changed, and, you know, even though you're not working together, you know, on the phone, you know, you're kind of expanding the community even though it's not personal. And also with it changing, you mentioned NFTs and crypto, and, you know, how your user base is under 24 years old. Buster.
Over 24.
Over, excuse me.
Over 24.
Well, anyway, Buster being here, right, especially with NFTs and crypto, Buster, you know, can you just talk about that? Because I'm interested, we talk about it all the time, you know, we're into physical, you know, we have autographs in the back over there, Ruth, Gehrig, you know, we hold it, we have it, we look at it, we put it in and out of the vault. Now things are going digital, and, you know, we're trying to learn more about it, as are, I think, a lot of people in the crowd tonight. So if you, and then maybe Darren can just kind of get into that and talk about it. Sorry, Darren.
And maybe start at the most basic
Yeah.
form of what is
Yeah.
an NFT.
Yeah, so an NFT is essentially, so the best way that I can break it down is usually people will start a project. And the interesting thing about NFTs, and I'll get into more of the specifics of what makes an NFT an NFT, but what's interesting about it is a lot of them have real utility. So whether it be this NFT acts as a ticket to this conference, this NFT unlocks free merchandise and events from that. This NFT unlocks a royalty of a product that this sells. This NFT unlocks what's called a governance token, which allows you to decide what happens with a lot of the money that the project makes. And that utility is something that traditionally in physical collectibles has never existed. Your Jordan jersey doesn't grant you access to hang out with Michael Jordan, whereas with an NFT, certain projects do grant you access to hang out with the creators of said project. What an NFT is at its core is a digital item on what's called the blockchain, which can be bought and sold in a specific cryptocurrency that represents something greater usually. There are ridiculous ones that give you nothing and have no historical significance. It's funny, like the same way how you look at some of the greatest legendary athletes of all time, or back in the day, you think of guys like Ruth, and you think of boxers like Muhammad Ali. But in an NFT, since it's so new, when you look at what is historic, it is things from 2017. So CryptoPunks, which I'm sure everybody in this room maybe hasn't heard of, but a lot of people have, is one of the earliest projects. It came out for free. All you had to do was claim it, and now the cheapest one is over $200,000 because people value, what is digital history in the same way that people value physical history. So that's sort of how I would break down how that is. But the most special thing about digital collectibles is the utility factor of it, that it can actually grant you in-person experiences, events, and things like that. That I like physical collectibles even more than I like digital, but physicals to this point have not granted that same level of utility.
That was a great definition. Listen, I think that physical, it's very strange because I think this is right. People who collect physical things, we don't cheer on each other as much as people who've done the NFTs. And I think the reason for that is it's almost like there's a value in lifting people up. But we don't see that on the physical side. And I think that's something that we can learn from the digital side. I bought $93,000 worth of digital horses in February, last February. I had them for 41 days. They didn't die, they were digital, but my wife caught me whispering around the house and using an AirPods, which I never use. And she's like, "Are you cheating on me?" And I'm like, "No." I bought $93,000 in digital horses, and I'm concerned that you're concerned, that you're going to be concerned. And she said, "Yeah, that's bullshit. I'm going to divorce you if you don't sell those." So I sold them. I made a nice profit, and I told her like 4 months later, I'm like, "Yeah, so I sold them for like $200,000. I just wanted to see if you wanted to know how much they're worth now." She's like, you're probably gonna say $1 million. I'm like, 3.5 million, but so listen, at the end of the day,
Is the lesson there to divorce?
no, at the end of the day, I think everyone can't have FOMO, and they have to do what makes them happy. For me, I define myself by not following, and I thought that the culture was a little bit more determined by, like, I have to follow people and I have to ride the wave of people, and that did not strike me as what has made me successful as a collector, and so that made me uncomfortable. So while I cover NFTs, I don't have any more after the horses. So that's kind of my take, but it's been amazing to cover it and to watch it. And but again, one thing that I think we could take away from people who are collecting digital is them cheering each other on, and the physical people asking, or saying like, you're pumping and dumping, or you're buy your tickets collectible or whatever, and getting angry at people if they don't believe in it.
And I kind of hope that's what these events, this community that we're building here turns into, more of a positive, community as far as collecting, because like you said, it doesn't really exist with the physical. We have our own friends and stuff, but it's not really a big community of people, buying and selling and cheering each other on.
And we should talk about the negative sides if it's talked about in the right way. I don't think we should whitewash things. I just think that it seems like there's not enough of the cheering and we're adversaries, and that has never been more clear than looking at the digital people.
So going back to the digital real quick, I do want to talk about like the volatility, and there is so many NFTs out there that are just bullshit, right? They come out, they skyrocket, and you look at them the next day or the next week, the next month, and they just come right back down. So how does a collector or somebody who doesn't really know much about an NFT, how do we protect ourselves, or how do we learn more so that doesn't happen? Because that doesn't happen in any other market, right? That's pretty unique to the NFTs.
It happens when you prospect. It's sort of the same concept, but there's so many things to look out for in NFT projects. I mean, the first thing you want to find is a great founder, preferably somebody that's doxed so people know who they are, because there are a lot of anonymous founders, and that's usually what the first sign of something going south is going to be, if there's an anonymous founder that's not super engaged and doesn't have a lot to lose. Because if you're anonymous, you've no reputation to keep up unless you've built that under that anonymous name. So making sure that you know the person or people that are behind it, and track records, right? If somebody's built a very large business before, it's a pretty good indicator that they know something. As opposed to first time. Not that there's anything bad with it, but it's something to keep in mind when looking at it, and that people aren't just going to give up on a project. Those are some of the things that I'd look for. But of course, 99% of projects are terrible and are going to go to zero. That's just the fact of the matter. But the great ones are, the opportunities like Bored Apes that you could mint for $200, and if you kept every single drop that they gave you, you'd be sitting at $600,000 on the low end in less than a year. So $200 to $600,000.
It's like they're like 65%, David. That's horrible. 13,000% I got from my. It's actually very hard to. We used to be looked at as the guys who had like 7 eyes when you're like, hey, that autograph is collectible or whatever. And now there's a guy saying, all right, so there's these cyber comms, there's these gorillas, okay? But check it out. Every day you hold one, you get 10 bananas. And I'm like, wait, so there's a dividend of banana. Yes, and you could sell the bananas separately, but you could keep your gorilla. So, it's true. It's true. The guy was telling me the other day, he's like, I have over 1,000 bananas. Each banana is valued at $42. I'm generating $420 a day just on digital bananas. It's so funny, that we used to be the crazy people, and then people are having serious conversations about this, and you're like, I didn't knowingly take drugs this morning. So it's kind of funny.
Just a real quick follow-up. being in my late 20s, you know, telling people what I do, who are mostly in corporate jobs. You know, I'm in finance, I'm an accountant, I'm a lawyer. You know, when I used to say, oh, I deal in rare collectibles, they would be like, well, what does that mean? What do you do? And then I do the rare autographs, rare cards, vintage, and stuff like that. Now when I talk about that, the first thing people say is, oh, do you do NFTs? And I say, well, no, not yet, because more physical. And maybe some people have this question here or don't know. Dealing with Abraham Lincoln signed documents, can I take a picture of that and turn it into an NFT? Can that be digitalized and turned into an NFT?
Well, the answer to that is depends on the images, public domain. We've talked about this stuff before, but what matters more is does anybody want that,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
And,
They want the bananas though.
but they definitely want the bananas. But it's because of the communities that those projects have built. Where you were able to do the same thing, and even more so, say for every physical there's a digital associated with it. So when you sell the Lincoln, they also get the NFT, and they tie together. So. That's where I think the collectible impact will happen and crossover, but it's all very, very new still, and early. People are figuring out what works and what doesn't.
I think eventually there is a crossover back to physical from the NFT people. What you have to realize is people who never collected anything before, even if they're driven by money potentially, they are now considering themselves a collector. And so there are millions of more people who are now considering themselves collectors, which ultimately, when the projects go south, I don't know if that's gonna sour, their opinion of collecting. But I do think that there is a positive to the physical eventually, because people who have never been collectors now consider themselves collectors.
By the way, I'm a complete NFT moron and know nothing about this, so I probably shouldn't have a microphone in my hand. But the one interesting utility is having the NFT representative of the value of the physical. And I think that it's a really interesting concept, and it's a concept that's been pitched around a lot lately about having the physical in a vault and having the NFT be the piece that actually trades. And it's completely 100% tethered to the value of the physical. It can't trade independently of, and I think that that's actually an interesting utility for an NFT based off of your question.
So as collectible, have you IPO'd an NFT yet, or is that on the horizon?
And I put the mic in my hand. No, I don't believe we have. So listen, I think that NFTs are definitely an interesting conversation in the moment. I can tell you my full exposure to NFTs, when I got back into collecting, I started buying all the boxes that I wanted as a little kid. And I ordered a case of, I think, 1992 Skybox that I found, basketball. And my wife was...
Nice Drazen Petrovic in that one.
Actually, yes, 100%. But my wife walked in and I have wrappers everywhere, and she's like, are you fucking kidding me? Can you please just start collecting NFTs? And I'm like, no, I love cards. This is my passion. This is what I want.
I think that's the first wife that ever said that.
Definitely. Yeah. And I'm happy she left. But
She left the room, or she left?
no, she was here earlier.
Oh.
She had to go to our dinner.
But she left your life. I was
No.
Over 92
No.
Skybox? That's
No, I've got at least 25 years before that happens. No, but I think that collectible, provides an interesting value opportunity for the NFT community, right? We can put a security wrapper around an NFT and actually allow it to trade in a compliant manner. We haven't done it yet. Maybe we do it, maybe we don't. That's something you can ask Ezra. But to me, that would be an interesting way to dabble in the NFT world.
Yeah, I think most people would agree, if you've done even just a little research, that NFTs, blockchain is the future. In some way or the other, it's just what is the future, what is the process, what are the products that are going to be valuable down the line. And I think I saw a clip, and I don't mean to plug Gary V, who asked to be here, by the way, but I told him I had, Darren and Marino and Buster. But he had a great clip, and he was making a great analogy, actually, and it was to 2000 and the stock market and the NASDAQ in particular. Because back then, yeah, there were great tech stocks that came out of that, but there was so much BS in between, and nobody knew what they were doing. And he said, that's kind of like NFTs right now. There's great stuff going on, it's very small percentage, but that's gonna be the future. And right now, it's just a cluster F of trying to figure out what is the next big thing. But anyway, I wanna go back to tickets. You guys mentioned tickets before, and I'm gonna let just Darren run with this. There was, first of all, Darren's a huge ticket collector, and tickets have always been collectible. Let me start it off like that.
Thank you very much.
And so I'll just let you go.
I came into tickets about 3 years ago. I love the stories associated with them. I love that they're art and the fact that PSA was slabbing them like cards and allowing you to look up populations. I'm a big fan of real scarcity versus false scarcity. It just ticked all the boxes for me. Allowed me to enjoy history, and it's like one of those things where I just couldn't stop, and I would tell the people after I bought something on eBay, can you not use the eBay tape? Because I could claim that something was like something else other than eBay, unless you use the eBay tape. When the wife sees like 27 packages with the eBay tape, that's like not good. So I'd say I'm obsessed with tickets. I love them, and they are collectible. I brought a couple here today.
We're gonna.
Just 14.
But
Yeah, just a whole duffel bag filled with them.
Yeah.
But
Well, because I'm Johnny Ticket Seat. I have to spread my love to at least one person in here who then becomes addicted to it. So
there you go. And you talk about real scarcity versus false scarcity. I mean, if we were at the Yankee game tonight, nobody here would have a ticket. They're done. It's over. Nobody uses it.
which I think is kind of a shame, because I think it hurts the. So my goal right now is I'm talking to teams and saying, hey, even if you have to sell it for free, you have to print a ticket with integrity, which is the same way that they've done it before. It has to be printed before the season, or box office. It can't come after, because there's all this mumbo jumbo about that. So I'm working with teams like the Cubs to say, hey, even if you have to charge an option for $250, $300, you can't use the tickets, but if there's a big game or a great game, you got it. And if it's $250, if there was an incredible thing that happened, you got your money back. So I'm working with teams saying these are collectibles, print them with integrity, and make them beautiful, and season ticket holders will actually buy them.
Yeah.
So-
These next upcoming stars, there's not going to be a ticket for their debut.
Right.
You're never going to have that where you have Mantle's debut. Things like that. Not just sports. I know the two of you have talked about it, and Buster, we've talked about it. But it's not just rare sports events, it's movie tickets, Buster. Can you start talking about that just real quick?
Yeah, I mean, that was totally a joke. I had this idea. I was like, well, PSA grade this opening day movie ticket for like Star Wars or these big movies. And I had to personally ask, and they said, all right. So we did it. And then, they came back all random grades. And then chaos ensued because I posted it. It did like 1 million views on my page. And then all these other media outlets posted it. And then Cardborn was like, "Are tickets collectible?" And then everybody, including Darren, wrote like paragraphs in the comment section. It was pretty funny. But then they apologized and took back their comment, which was a big win for the ticket folk. But that was totally a joke. I did it for content. But I think it's fun. Like, it makes me happy. And I think at the end of the day, anything in the hobby that makes you happy is a win. So that's sort of how I look at that. And,
Full circle.
And a lot of other weird collectibles like press passes that Darren and I have both gotten graded that just like mean something to us. So that's sort of my take on that.
For tickets, there's a couple things that are interesting. One, there's a chase to it. So like if I want a card, I can pretty much find it and get it and buy it. And there's a comp to it. With tickets, I came up with a list of 100 3 years ago. These are the 100 tickets I want. And I said, in a year, well, no one was doing it at the time, I'm going to get, I'm going to spend money and I'm going to get 70 to 90. Well, guess what? There's some that still have not surfaced. There has not been a Billie Jean King, Bobby Riggs, Battle of the Sexes ticket to emerge in 11 years. The Doug Flutie ticket, Hail Mary 1 emerged, and then I was like, okay, I gotta throw it out there. But there's still a bunch of tickets that have never seen the light of day in any auction on eBay or anything, and it's the chase, and then when you finally get it. And then the other thing is there is arbitrage to it, which is something about a game that someone doesn't know. which if I'm not Darren Revell and I'm NU Wildcat 99 on eBay, it's totally okay. If you come to me, then I have to give you fair market value, but if you don't realize that in the 2001 season, the September 16th Washington Redskins game against the Arizona Cardinals was postponed because of 9/11, and then, ironically, that became the end of the season, and that was Pat Tillman's last game, which in a way is kind of beautiful. Then it's free. So there are tickets that I've gotten that are worth $25,000 to $50,000 that I bought for $200. Guy had a collection of 1968 Mexico tickets and didn't realize that the Black Power salute was in there. It allows me to have fun, research, look for things, and then sometimes when you see things that, I like the obscure, so when I saw the Randy Johnson hit a bird ticket, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing, and then you realize there's only, each of the I don't want to take too much time, but each of the dynamics of the tickets, like, there's only so many Bartman tickets because there's 99% Cubs fans there. There's so many Jordan over Elo tickets because it was Cavs fans. They don't want to keep it. There's a lot of Shrug game tickets because on the back of the Jordan Shrug game ticket was if the Bulls score more than 120 points, you get a free pizza. If the Trailblazers, or it wasn't Trailblazers, but if the opponent scores less than 90, you get a free lottery ticket. So there's a lot of Shrug game tickets with the ads on the back. Some smart person went to all the Pizza Huts and the White Hen Pantries and Jewel-Osco's where you had to redeem your lottery ticket and got a bucket full of them. So there's intrigue about like why Don Larson perfect game. There's like a million of them. Why? Because like your grandfather said, I'll kill you if you ever sell this. So like there's those type of dynamics are really cool.
A lot of people accidentally end up with great tickets too. Like an example of that was 2013-14 Knicks season. Carmelo Anthony scored 62, so everybody bought the whole season tickets. Right. Giannis's debut was the first game of that season at the Garden. So people just happen to end up with stuff too, and that, these things prove themselves out over time. So that's pretty cool too.
That was the only good byproduct of being a Knicks fan.
Hey, it might have paid the Giannis debut. I mean, there's a bunch of them, but it's $3,000-4,000 that might have paid for your season tickets. Actually, as you bring up the Knicks, so one of my chases was the Reggie Miller 8 points in 9 seconds. That thing was impossible, like so impossible that the ticket that I got is like glued and taped and like I don't even know. It's like from only like 25 years ago, but it looks like it's from 1940. And it is what it is, but it does have the Nobody Beats the Wiz ad on the back.
It's fascinating to learn about tickets. I feel like just that tickets could be an hour or two long discussion.
It's not? Are we here till midnight? I'll be here till midnight.
But I do want to get to the show and tell real quick. But I skipped this with the last panel. But if anybody has a question they want to ask, think about it, line up here, and then when we're done with the show and tell, we'll do a few questions for the panel. So who wants to start with the show and tell?
I'll start. So I saw it was going to be raining, so I brought my entire NFT collection. So as you can see, every single one, hundreds of them, ranging from being a couple hundred to tens of thousands of dollars in my wallet that I can send to anybody at any point in time, require no space. And it's a beautiful thing. So that's what I did.
Hey, board 8?
Do you have a board 8?
Board 8?
It would be on a cold wallet. Yeah, it wouldn't be on a hot wallet.
So that's what's stored in a...
Yeah, so the difference between a cold and hot wallet. A hot wallet is something that I would have on my phone, whereas a cold wallet would be, through something that is inaccessible pretty much without,
where you have to
plugging
type in
it
11
in.
words.
Plugging it in, typing in 11 words. That's where you would put your really valuable stuff.
All right, I bought my bag of tricks here, just because. So this is the first ticket at Disneyland. It was July 17, 1955. There's about 15 of these. This was owned by Walt Disney's chief cartoonist, and this is the highest graded. On the back, the backs are great. On the back, they have the map for the first time for the ABC broadcast of Disneyland.
So good.
So we got that. We have just because Jackie Robinson is 75th anniversary tomorrow. I have this is a good one. Hold on a second. A full of Jackie stealing home in Game 1 of the 1955 World Series. Imagine the nuts you have to steal home in enemy territory at Yankee Stadium in the first game of the World Series. Yogi said he was out. He said he was safe. And then you go to the weird and obscure. We have this is the Senate pass for the day that Bill Clinton was acquitted. I've tried for 2 years to get Monica Lewinsky's autograph. This is also a weird one. A rather unremarkable game, unless you realize that this was when the Giants of New York beat the Packers of Green Bay, and in the end, an oblong football went through a giant H. So this is from Coming to America. This is the Coming to America game. Which one? This one? A couple more. I'm not going to take too much time here, but let's see here. I'm trying to think.
All the time you want.
This is the highest graded ticket to Willie Mays' catch in Game 1 of the 1951 World Series. Again, the obscure. I actually freaked out with this ticket. This is all alleged. I don't want to be sued for telling this during a public forum, but Cal Ripken had Kevin Costner over the house. You guys know this story?
Oh, yeah.
And, apparently Cal got in a fight with Kevin Costner, and his streak was on the line, and he made a phone call. And you could look at the news stories from that day. Apparently, the power outage was restricted just to the grid around Camden Yards. So, that's the PSA said. Sometimes I tell them, you buy a ticket because you think, Game 4 of the 1994 NBA Finals. You're like, put it into PSA. I'm like, no, O.J. Simpson car chase. And they're like, no, it didn't happen in the game. I go, yeah, but it was on the broadcast. Like, I'm fighting with them. Like, I need O.J. Simpson on the tag. It's got to say O.J. Simpson. So now I finally, after like a year, it says O.J. Simpson on broadcast. This is the Spike Lee choke game with Reggie Miller. We got that. Nobody beats the Wiz. And then this is the George Brett Pine Tar game, full ticket. And then, again, the back stated, Michelob, of course, and then also, $675. That's for the season for a field box. It's like that gives you half an inning at Legends now. So anyway, that's the fun ones. One more, or maybe 10 more. This is the Doug Flutie Hail Mary, Eastern Miami's hometown airline. So the story here is that they changed the game in the beginning of the season to a Friday night instead of a Saturday night, but they had no way to really communicate. The internet wasn't around, and I guess not everyone read the paper. So there was some executive assistant who had to X out the Saturday on all the tickets and type Friday, November 23rd. So again, like just the quirkiness of this type of stuff. Anyway, I love it.
Marilyn Monroe, please.
Oh, the Marilyn Monroe one. That's going to take a while to under. All right, here. This is the credential that was around Kobe's neck in 2008 in Beijing. I got that. Hold on, I gotta find I'll find the Marilyn Monroe. This is a ticket to the floor in the church for the most famous wedding of all time, Diana and Prince Charles.
Wow.
Doors to the cathedral open.
One of one, I guess.
One of one, yes. I get very upset. All right, I'll look for more.
You better find that.
I know, I will. I gotta look.
Before you leave here, find it.
All right, what do you bring?
All right, David, let's hear from David.
What do you bring?
How the fuck am I supposed to follow this?
Jesus Christ, I'm glad I went
Yeah.
Okay, you don't have to follow me, I got it.
Thank you.
This is there's 2 full tickets to the night that Marilyn sang Happy Birthday to JFK at Madison Square Garden. So this is a crazy one. And then like an example of the comps, like actually someone came to me, a fractional group and came to me and said, the last comp was $462 in 2013. I'm like, okay, what are you gonna do with, like, so the comps are.
I apologize.
No, when you have the SEC who's asking for comps, it's like, some of these things are so rare that it happened 10 years ago and, you know, there was one person interested in it. So that's actually a challenge from that standpoint.
All right, go ahead and I'll look.
Darren Rovell, everyone. All right, so mine is, no, this is the pack of baseball cards that I gave.
Wow, that is disappointing.
Listen, I don't have a full bag of tricks, like, anyway. So my belief is that, thanks for leading into this one. So my belief is that basically collects because of the affinity to something, right? So this is my elementary school gym teacher, Neil Berniker. Nice. Right, and Darren can relate to this. So I happen to know that you still have a very personal relationship with Mr. Shapiro, who is your teacher. So I think that that's something that's really interesting for the collecting world, but whatever. So when I was a big collector, when I was, 8 to 12 years old, I was also, a fanatical baseball player. Not that you can tell. But, so Neil Berniker was my gym teacher. He knew that I loved collecting. And I think that this represents an interesting journey. So Neil went to fantasy camp, got to play with the legends from his childhood, and took his baseball card home and gave it to me as a 10-year-old kid at Horace Mann, and I've kept it. I've kept it the whole time. This is my favorite card.
It's really cool.
Absolutely my favorite card in the whole world. So other than Marvel cards and some other fun quirky things, not Marilyn Monroe's ticket, this is one of my favorite collectibles, so share that.
I'll do a couple more.
That's the audience.
Do you guys want to see more, or are we going to Q&A?
Yeah, more.
All right, we have Bo running over Bosworth, signed by both of them.
It's pretty hard for Bosworth, probably.
Yeah, and then we have, he didn't know how to spell his name. And then we have Sandy Koufax sitting out the Yom Kippur game on the first game of the World Series, signed by Sandy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's okay. And then we have the Rudy game signed by Rudy, where he made it. Where he made an X where he sacked the quarterback, Rudy Allen.
Got that?
No, let's see.
Darren, what was the one you chased down the longest that you finally got?
What's your favorite?
Maybe the Flutie. Maybe the Flutie. A press pass to the JFK dinner that never happened because he didn't make it. Yeah. Check Twitter, my tweet. Tiger sign 97 Masters. Yeah. Anyway, if you want to see more, come up later. But let's get to questions. I don't want to steal the show.
Any questions here? Anybody want to come up for some questions? All right, here we go. This is David Seidman.
I love your collection, Darren. I actually have two questions. What's your holy grail?
It was the Jackie Robinson debut. I've never been rich enough to buy it at each point in my life. I was the underbidder last year at $36,000, and now it's now it went. And that was a nicer one that went for $480. So that's gonna let me. I'm just never gonna get it, but that's okay.
Okay. That leads to my second question. Tickets are skyrocketing more than any other non-game use memorabilia. And they almost displace photos and autographs as the collectible?
So photos are interesting because I think Type 1 has always been out there, and I think there's confusion around Type 1. The only ones that have really done very well are the 20s baseball, the Conlon ones, but then people don't know what to do. Hey, there's a great photo of Jordan, and this is in film. I think tickets are easily explainable. let's wait until fraud perpetrates the ticket industry and see how we, PSA is gonna be under a lot of pressure. Because I did buy a fake ticket
Oh,
and they slabbed it. And we worked to get it off the market. So it's gonna start now, and that's a concern of mine. So we'll see. I'm also concerned about how fast things are going up. Like, I worry about the debuts and whether, like, I like that card people are coming into it, but they're seeing that the debuts are like the rookie card. For me, it's the moments. That's what it's what gets the hair on the back of my neck standing up. The moments that I knew where I was when. That Kobe Bryant scored 0 points in his NBA debut. I ain't paying $35,000 for that. Like, his final game signed by him, yeah. So I worry about the debuts because they're going nuts. I think, yes, like for Jackie Robinson, the debut makes sense, but and I don't, if that's what people want, that's great, but for me, I'm staying in my zone of moments, but the debuts are obviously going insane. That Tom Brady went 1 for 3 passing, 6 yards, and on November 23rd, 2000 against the Detroit Lions. No. I'm collecting the Tuck game, and I'm collecting him replacing Bledsoe. Because if Bledsoe doesn't get hurt on a $103 million contract, Tom Brady's working at Morgan Stanley. So that's the ticket that's the ticket that I care about, not the I also, by the way, speaking, I do have one Lions ticket. It is John Madden's Turducken debut. The first time you mentioned Turducken, so I have both of those in PSAs. Very important. Wish I got it signed by Madden before you.
And the word turducken is on the PSA stuff?
It is.
All right, Neil.
Thank you. My question's for Darren. You mentioned Kobe Bryant a couple times tonight. He had long relationships with Upper Deck and Panini, and I know that you guys had a bit of a relationship. I'm just wondering, did you guys ever talk about the hobby at all? And if so, what were his thoughts maybe?
We actually never talked about the hobby. We talked a lot about business. I know he had a lot of pride in everything he did. I know he changed his autograph from kind of like the flying Kobe to the full Kobe Bryant. So I know he took pride when he had things signed, and that everything that he did was I think a high standard, and so there's just not a lot of crappy Kobe signatures out there, which I think he'd probably be proud of. He was weird with his he cared about certain memorabilia, not much. But he was not Jordan, who cared nothing, zero. Jordan, zero, did not collect anything. When I was in Jordan's office, I'm like, oh, what's that sneaker? He's like, I don't know. So he liked to keep some things, but we didn't really talk about the hobby so much.
Jeffrey.
So I'm not going to give Darren every question. I'll give Buster a question too. But when it comes to the NFTs, what's your advice when you're looking for, as I don't own any, and I've been interested in the past couple weeks, months. What's your best advice to a newcomer to invest? And I know you spoke a little bit about all of these utilities and stuff like that, but what's the best thing to look for, I'd say?
Yeah, I'd say if you're just getting into it, look for projects with guaranteed utility, from Doc's founders who, even if the project went to less than what you bought it for, you were at least getting that utility, so you could, compartmentalize it that way and come out with a win regardless, and that, was sort of an initiation. But, hop on a lot of these discords for these projects. There are projects with 200,000 Discord members, who are all talking and passionate about the same thing.
Sense of community.
Those numbers are mind-blowing. That's like 2, maybe more football stadiums of people all passionate about the same freaking collectible.
It's just for someone we've been talking about, we do this because we love it, it's the hobby. I don't buy cards for return on investment. I buy the cards I was telling Chris before that I love. Whenever I see a card that I like, I buy it because that's what I want. When it comes to NFTs, it's not, would you not recommend that?
You'd be surprised.
Right?
It's everybody gets into it trying to make money, and then they can't really sell it because of the emotional attachment to the community. Because it's like once you own it, you're now part of that community. If you sell it, you're not in the same way that you were when you owned it. So selling it is like saying goodbye to your friends. So people don't like to sell their NFTs unless it's life-changing profit. That's what I've seen for people who are really involved in those communities, and that's one of the reasons why I was like, all right, I gotta pay attention to this in addition to the physical.
Thank you. Anybody else have a question? All right, so we haven't talked about it much, I don't know why, but there is a Honus Wagner T206 in this room, within 20 feet of all of us. So we are going to get to that. Should we do it right now?
Yeah, let's do it and throw the game on.
Well, I think that was going to be a teaser, man.
Does anyone have any Piedmont cigarettes to smoke?
Last I heard, the game was in rain delay. Are we back on?
Who cares about the game?
All right. So why don't we bring up Ryan Dwyer right now? Actually, let's give a round of applause to the panel. Thank you guys so much.